So, I mean, yeah, what is going on with your life now with COVID and everything? This is my first, by the way, podcast that's post-COVID. Everything else.
Oh, okay.
I did a bunch of recordings at Evo that we're releasing that are totally not relevant to anything that's going on now.
Yeah. No, I gotcha.
How is your life going now?
It's pretty quiet. I mean, it's weird because not that before COVID was like crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every day was still day in, day out, but I don't know. So one thing that was interesting to me is like a lot of people on social media were like, "Oh, I'm an introvert, but like this is affecting me more than I thought." And I'm assuming this is maybe because I'm in Seoul, where it's like not as bad, right? As in LA, where it's like literal lockdown.
Yeah, you can't leave. Yeah.
So maybe that's the difference. But to me, I was like, I don't know. I just like go out to eat less.
I feel like in some ways I'd be a good prisoner. You know what I mean? Like I'm pretty good at handling just staying inside and stuff. But I guess for me the biggest shock is just there are no events anymore.
Well, yeah, it's weird.
This is fucking up everything for people working in esports.
Yeah. Well, so
It's
one
crazy.
thing that hit me, because obviously, like, so I left ESL last year, and then did some freelance events, but not so much event stuff, right? I was looking for more like consulting stuff or whatever in the back end. So it didn't affect my cycle too much. But as soon as it started hitting, just all of people we know that are freelancers, everyone just shut down immediately, and like their social media shut down because they had nothing to talk about because nothing was going on. Yeah, it was a very big change of pace. Very big change of pace.
It's weird because I saw so many people on Twitter talking about how stream numbers are doing well, and then therefore like esports is doing well.
No, yeah.
And these are not the same thing. Like just because people are still watching streams doesn't mean that there aren't huge throngs of people without work. Like for me, events is almost literally 50% of my income.
Right.
Like,
yeah, it's
like just trying to like restructure my life and I mean I don't have any like big expenses, but just having a blow like that is huge.
It's different from like, oh, I missed out on like one or two events because of whatever like schedule or maybe negotiation. Like that's different from, oh, I just like can't expect any events for perhaps the year, right? Like that's a huge blow. And it's not even just commentators, right? I think a lot of people forget. They're like, oh, but like commentators, like, oh, like you can stream or whatever. First of all, that's like a bad argument too. But on top of that, it's all the TOs, like all their employees, people who
event organizers. I mean, just cameramen. Referees. It's really bad for pro gamers. Yeah, because it doesn't seem like online events will ever have as good of a prize pool.
Right.
Like you can have stuff online, so it's not the end of the world, but at the same time, like this is really a huge blow to like everything. Like I can't even imagine if I were to release a game in this environment and then just have no esports for it.
It's like focus on esports, but no events.
Yeah.
I think it's because obviously like the headline was I think it should be that it's surviving better, right?
Right.
Like it's built for survival in situations like this, but just because it's surviving better than sports or like music events, it doesn't like make it a great thing.
Yeah.
It's not a positive. It's not like, all right.
It's also it's forced everybody to start streaming. And now, how long have you been streaming, by the way?
So regularly, probably only after I got to Korea. So like just almost half a year.
Okay, yeah. I've only been streaming now for like a month and a half or something, and it was something I actually intended to do, but I guess forced into it.
Right.
Just like I'm seeing a lot of commentators streaming.
Yeah.
And in a way, I mean that's good. There's something that we can do.
Yeah.
To get by. How is streaming for you compared to event hosting or working at ESL?
So I used to always say, because I streamed a little bit regularly when I first was in Korea for OGN, like back in the day, and then not much at all, right? Just because of work. But even back then, and then when I started streaming again this time, I always said that I have the utmost respect for like full-time streamers. Yeah. Because it's just very different. Everyone's like, oh, but you're on camera all the time. And I'm like, you don't understand. Like, this isn't the same thing.
No, I've had the same conversations where people go, why don't you just stream? And I thought, like, do you think these are the same thing at all? I mean, I really like putting on shows and like, and or even like doing this podcast, packaging something together and then being like, okay, here. Yeah. You can have this, you can watch it forever. But I will say I'm enjoying streaming. a lot. I didn't know I would like it this much, but I'm really having a lot of fun.
That's good. It took me longer, I think. And I think a big part of it is finding like the type of stream or content you are streaming, right? So some people like pros obviously just stream their game, right? They stream it nonstop, and it's not too different. Like they have to care about a couple more things than when they're playing on their own. And then there's people who just stream like talk show content or whatever, or like even just chatting, right? There are like streamers who just do IRL chats, like
just
all
turn
the
the
time.
camera on and just
that
sit there.
I can't do. Like
I
can't do that. But I think I've finally found kind of a direction where I can just talk a little bit more freely about different games, just because even within esports, like that was my, I guess background, right? I jumped around so many different games, and while I may not have the most in-depth knowledge of any one genre, like I got to experience, and kind of cross-pollinate across different genres. So whether it's esports or just like single-player games, now that I've found that niche, it has become more enjoyable. And it's what I've discovered is it's actually allowing me to enjoy games I wouldn't otherwise on my own.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like, can you give an example?
So a good example is like any game that has any element of like open world nature or like not that much direction. I don't do very well. I want my games to be very streamlined. Like I want
okay. So you normally wouldn't like Skyrim or Fallout.
I've started Skyrim like 3 times, and I've always stopped as soon as you get the first like shout. Like that is when I stop. And same with Fallout. Like I've never gotten through them. And a big part of it, I think, is just because for me, like I need very clear objectives when I play games. Like I want to know what I'm doing and why I'm there. And if they're like, here's a playground, I'm like, no, like I want to be told what to do so that then I know why I feel cool rather than like making my own story. I'm just not very good at that, which is weird to say because my whole job is based on creativity, and I'm like, I'm not very good at creative games or whatever.
No, I've had this with some games where it's open world, but it's like, okay, this is too much. Like I tried starting Red Dead 2, and I got to like these generals. I mean, and first of all, Rockstar games are like really slow.
Yes,
like they're just they're so so slow to build up to anything. But like, I got to this general store, and then I found out I can like buy gum. Or shoot. There was something happened in my brain where I was like, no, I just like, I was like, I'm going to stop playing. And then I never went back. I was like, that's like too much. And I don't even want to. I had this with Fallout 4 when they told me I could build a base.
Oh, okay.
Where I'm like,
it was just too much stuff.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to. And like, when I can like sell shit on a trading like caravan thing, I'm like, that's too much. I can't do it. I like it more when I have a very packaged, like I just played Resident Evil 2, the
Which
remake.
is great, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But it's very
it's streamlined.
Streamlined,
Yeah. I'm the same way. Red Dead 2, I think, is a perfect example where I felt the same way. And in the beginning, I was like, oh, it's slow, but it's cool. I can see why people like it. And as soon as I saw that you could do, like the tagline is like, you can do anything, right? But I don't want to do anything. Like I want to do very specific things in my video games.
Yeah, I like more of a tailored experience in that sense. I mean, sometimes those games are fun, but I think generally I find I get turned off.
So but that's one thing where I realize if I'm streaming, because I can talk to people about it, right? Whether it's me complaining about it or whether it's me like talking about my thoughts out loud and then people responding, or people sometimes maybe even giving tips, like that has made it so I can now enjoy these parts that normally I wouldn't, and I could see more merit in why other people enjoy it.
It does seem like there's certain games that are better to be social in.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people, like from the line of work that we both done a lot of, which is, you're hosting a large event, there's a big audience. I think, at least for me, I don't know if this is true for you as well, but I always thought of streaming as something that I had to be a performer in. Like I had to put on a show, when in reality, it's just people want to hang out with me and kind of, I guess, see me in my natural habitat, And once I figured that out, and I mean, I'm very new to streaming still, but once I realized that, I'm like, oh, okay, now I get it.
Yeah. No, I agree, because it used to, I think not that streaming's easy in any way, right? Not to take away from the like effort it takes, especially for people who have been doing it for a long time, but I think I put on the wrong type of stress, I think is the right way to put it, like you said, where in my head, if I'm ever going live in any environment, right? Especially if there's a camera involved, but even if not, like even just audio, if I am going live, like I need to be in a very specific state of mind and a very specific tone. But I actually went back and watched some of my earlier streams, and that made it like more boring, right? Because it was so curated, and it's like that's not why people are there. Like you said, they just want to find a certain type of community. I mean, sometimes they're there because of like very specific things like gameplay or high level gameplay, but a lot of times it's just like you just want to hang out. Like you just want that experience of going over to a friend's house and sitting on the couch and like playing games or watching TV together. And once I found kind of a smaller group of people that I found that with in terms of in chat, and then I started realizing, okay, now I can take this a little bit more relaxed. Again, still a lot of thinking and prepping about like how do I want to do this if I'm playing a different game or whatever, but very different from preparing for an event.
Do you find when you're switching from game to game that you get pushback on that? I know sometimes someone will stream a certain game and then it's like, I thought this was like a PUBG stream, or what the fuck?
My favorite. Yeah. Have you seen the clip from Tim the Tap Man?
I think I know. I don't know this guy's name, but I think I've seen him. Talk about this.
He's like, Valorant made you, and then he says, PUBG made you. It's like, you see that in a lot of games. Yeah. I have even with very small numbers, I've noticed that, right?
Yeah.
Like I'd be playing Final Fantasy, and then I'd finish like one Final Fantasy, and I'd want to take a break because they're very long games. So I'd play some Valorant, and people are like, "Oh, like when are you playing the next Final Fantasy?" And then they just like leave.
Yeah,
never to be seen again. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like we could still hang out. Like we're still just chatting, but like they're there for other experiences, right? And they would rather go to a different channel. And some of them come back when I return to certain games. And same with like Valorant or League, where people will be like, "Oh, like you're not playing." Like, are you not playing this game anymore? Like, I get that, and I thought it was more of a meme when the bigger streamers that have been doing it for a long time talk about it. I thought it was more viewers just wanting to, I don't know, get attention. But now I'm realizing that I guess it means a lot more to people than I thought. And I don't mean that in an offensive way, but I say this to my stream all the time. Like, I used to not watch streams at all. Like, I only watch streams because of like esports, and now because I stream, because it's like kind of my job now to pay attention to it. But otherwise I'm like very bad with like, I don't watch YouTube videos in my pastime. I don't watch streams. So I think it took a lot more for me to understand why people are there, I guess.
Or I guess also people having the connection with you to a certain game.
Right.
As well.
Yeah. It's like if an actor, makes their debut in a certain movie, right? And you're that guy, or you're the Apple guy.
You're almost like, it's like there's always these guys in movies that, or TV, they get typecasted as like a cop or a general. You know what I mean? Where it's like, this guy's been a general in like 6 different catastrophe movies. He's always the general that's like not listening to the scientists. Like, you'll see this. Or like guys that have just played cops. And, yeah, I think sometimes if you're a streamer, it's almost like you want to get people want to typecast you into a certain thing. So how has Final Fantasy been streaming? Because I've been following your Twitter.
It's changed.
Now, did you play the original Final Fantasy VII?
No.
Okay, that's how old are you?
No, I'm 31.
You're 31. Okay, I'm 35 or 30. I think I'm 35. So because I first experienced Final Fantasy VII, I must have been in like 6th grade.
Right.
It was mind blowing for me.
So I didn't grow up with. I was full Nintendo growing up, and then.
So then, were you started on Super Nintendo for that age group, or was that Nintendo 64?
Well, I got a NES like hand me down. And then Super Nintendo was like the first one we owned as a family. Yeah. And then it was just all the way through the Wii. I only ever had a Nintendo, and then just a PC. And the first other console I ever owned was an Xbox One and a PS4. In 2015.
Oh my gosh, okay.
So like I missed out on a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot of history.
It's a lot of it.
But so you never played any of the Final Fantasies?
So I played Crystal Chronicles because that was on GameCube. It was a spin-off game, and then I played 15 when it came out on PS4, and that was when I realized like I just have a very different viewpoint of Final Fantasy, because to me, like I've seen clips of Final Fantasy, right? And I always thought, oh, this universe seems cool. Like I think I'd enjoy it. And so 15 to me was just mind-blowing. It was like the greatest game. Yeah. But then all the Final Fantasy fans were like, it was okay. It wasn't that great. And I was like, this is the best. Like, you guys know what you're talking about. So then I played 7 Remake when it came out without ever playing the original.
So you never knew the story.
So and I never, apparently I somehow lived under a cave and dodged like all the spoilers ever in Final Fantasy VII. I just had no idea.
This is so crazy to me because just that there was a couple games from my childhood that were just so impactful, and the original Final Fantasy VII was like, I mean, I remember where I was when I saw, and I didn't even. It was like my friend's older brother. I was at his house and I saw him playing, and I was like, whoa, like you can tell a story like this now. And I guess there was that, and Metal Gear Solid. And like a few other games where it's like, this is crazy.
Right.
But I can't imagine like having never experienced it before and then experiencing it now.
So it was, and that's what got me started on this whole like train of Final Fantasy games that I'm streaming now is, so even during Remake, before I played the original 7, like seeing all the reactions of the OG fans of the classic Final Fantasy games. Yeah. And how, like, for instance, we'd see a cutscene of like Sephiroth in the remake, right? And I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, I've heard his name. He seems really badass. But then people in chat are going crazy for different reasons because they're just like, oh, this is just like I imagined it when I saw it in the older graphics, right?
It's actually, if you go back to the old Final Fantasy, it's like unplayable, like Final Fantasy VII. It seriously is. I had this was a girl I dated a couple years back. She was really into games but didn't grow up with them. Okay. And she wanted to know what the classics were. And I said, well, you should play Final Fantasy VII. And I downloaded it for her. And she just, I like have you seen the pictures? Like their hands look like fucking brooms.
Yeah.
You know, and the graphics are so bad. And then the combat system's actually just, well, it's like not a game.
Yeah, so I'm playing like all the older ones now, and obviously some of them have like remasters or whatever, but it's actually gotten me to enjoy thinking about like game design a lot more. Yeah. Because the first thing I realized, well, obviously graphics, and then the second thing was there's just like no direct, like they don't explain anything. No. Like we just all had to figure it out on our own. Like you had to do so much testing, and then obviously like quick saves weren't a thing, so your testing time was very valuable back in the day. Yeah. But these days there's like tutorials, you don't even have to go to the internet. It's just all in game, or you just press a button and it tells you what to do, where to go.
I mean, in the original Final Fantasy, like on the one on Nintendo, they didn't even tell you what the spells did. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, I don't know if this cures poison. It's not labeled that well. Right. It's bad Japanese translation. Yeah. So it was like it was kind of like a hardcore thing if you could push through and get it.
Yeah. So it's been fun because I've now played Remake. I did play the original 7 afterwards, 8 and 9, and after each game, like I'll ask chat, so like what I miss, and there's just like this huge array of things that I just wasn't utilizing that could have made my life so much easier. And they're like, oh yeah, you like actually had this spell the whole time, and then you like it was in the original 7. I apparently had regen the whole time, where you just get passive regen going if you cast it, but I didn't know. I just didn't read over it.
Yeah, this happened. Okay, so I think there's something to this because like, we have backgrounds in games like StarCraft or League of Legends, and a lot of these games you're mostly you're given what you have. Yes. And the idea of endlessly leveling up and having to research new weapons or spells. Right. I mean, for me, I've had so many games where I'm playing through and I don't realize, okay, I need to like, if I just upgrade this thing, or like if you just go into the move list, right? Or you have something that'll regen you there. Because whenever I get items in a game, I'm like, okay, yeah. Just grab everything. I don't, I've had so many RPGs where I've played through and just looked in the inventory. I've been like, what the fuck is all this stuff?
No, I'm with you.
Yeah, it's. But I think part of me having that experience comes from a background of playing games where, what you start out with is what you have.
Exactly. You have a very specific arsenal, and also it's not like, for instance, whether it's build trees or skill trees in like MMOs, or build trees in StarCraft or even League, it's pretty easy to like discover it, right? Like, it doesn't take digging and leveling up and then it like pops up secretly in the menu and you have to check it every time. Like that doesn't happen. You click on it and it's grayed out, but you see, oh, like that looks cool, like I want to build that, and then you can experiment and you learn from there. So I think that's part of it is, it's like even in online games, I often have trouble branching out, right? Because I'll realize a build and I really like it, and then I'm like, why would I ever change it? Like it works.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with this. So what Final Fantasies have you gone through now? And I'm not sure about this, but is this a thing where you're going to try to go through?
Yeah, well, it's become that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
that has now become the plan. So starting with Remake, obviously I played 15 when it came out. Remake, Original 7, Crisis Core, and then 8 and 9. And now waiting to start 10.
10's good.
So originally I was going to stop after 9 and take a break.
No,
play some other games, and everyone's like,
you can't do that.
Need to play that.
So here's my Final Fantasy history.
Okay.
I actually started with the first Final Fantasy.
Oh, dang.
I started with the first Final Fantasy. I must have been in elementary school, and it blew my mind because it was just there was nothing that was like that.
Right.
And so to kind of have that experience, and then I saw 7.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, fuck, like, whoa, like this is so crazy. I had just beaten Final Fantasy 1, and this was still like a kind of a vintage game.
Right.
At the time, I mean, Nintendo was old
right.
even then. I'm in like 6th grade or something. I beat 7, which is amazing. Final Fantasy 6, are you going to go back and play that? This is 3 in America, by the way.
Right. So originally I wasn't, but then everyone was like, no, you need to. So now I'm wondering if
that might be the best one.
Go back.
Yeah.
Because the reason I was interested once I started the original 7 was now I was invested in, because I've heard so many arguments about like 7's the best, 10's the best, 9's the best, whatever. So I was like, oh, I want to try it all like now in 2020 and see if I have very like strongly different opinions, right? Because obviously there's elements of nostalgia and graphics and whatever.
Right. I think also people play these games at certain ages when they're in certain periods of their life.
Yeah.
Like for me when I played Final Fantasy 7, that was like I was a little kid, and this was like the first, I think, adult story.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there's much adult. I mean, your character falls in love, and you're working for a terrorist organization that's like fighting to save the planet. I mean, there's a lot of stuff where you're like, okay,
right.
This is like a pretty. I guess it'd be like on par of like Star Wars or something.
Mm-hmm.
Where you're like, okay, this is a universe, and I'm getting really into it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Well, we were talking about 6. So originally it wasn't in my plans. I was kind of go with like the 3D line of Final Fantasies, but then it's because 6 seems to be so regarded so highly. I'm thinking I'll probably go back and play it at some point.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how you like it because there's a whole. With all these classic Final Fantasies, there's a lot of grinding, and kind of it. Like, have you heard of Final Fantasy Mystic Quest?
No.
Don't play it. It's not even made by the same people, but it's like only grinding. Like there's like no story.
Okay.
But somehow this was like a game that people like made, and other people spent their money, and played it and beat it. And it's very weird to go back and look where you're like, games were in a different time then. But I'm curious to see what you think of 6 because the universe is very good, but I do think it's somewhat bare bones for.
Okay.
I guess.
It's
world building.
It's weird. So 7 and 8, I inadvertently like didn't grind at all. Like 7, I missed like every side quest other than luckily finding Yuffie and Vincent as optional characters. I didn't even know they were optional. To me, that just seemed a natural flow of progression. But because I just come off of playing Remake with 7, I was so intent on figuring out the story. So I just like grinded the main story only. Like I didn't farm anything.
I got a question, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but because I have the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I've maybe played like 5 hours of it, and I'm obviously far from finishing it, but it's not the whole Final Fantasy VII story, right? It's just Midgar, right?
And that's like the first part where my mind was blown because I played the original. I was like, this is like 8 hours of gameplay, and then the remake's like 40 hours of gameplay.
Yeah. That's are they going to make more?
The remake?
Yeah.
I don't think it's specified on how many parts they're going to divide it into, but I think the intent is to like finish the whole story.
Oh, that's good to hear because I kind of got turned off when I found it was just. I was like, wait a minute, but the whole story is because it's such. This was I mean, for younger people that are watching or listening to this, I mean. This was a crazy concept to have a game that was like 100 hours to beat.
Yeah.
It was basically the equivalent of those big thick fantasy novels where you gotta. It's like if you've gone through a whole series, you've read 4,000 pages.
Yeah, no, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, where it's a commitment.
Yes,
it's a commitment, and there's just so much love and craft put into that world.
Yeah.
So there's a lot you can get out of it. But yeah, it was a crazy thing back then. But I'm relieved now to hear that they're going to have other chapters, because I was almost turned off. I wanted to stop. And so you've done 8 and 9. Now, how did that compare to 7?
So out of the 3, 8's definitely the lowest. Not and I think it to me, it just felt like they tried too many new things. Because if I look at every aspect of 8 separately, I think it's really cool. But because it was all new, it just wasn't explained well, and it wasn't that fleshed out. I'm actually debating if I like 9 more than 7, but if so, it's probably only because I'm discovering that maybe I just like the traditional high fantasy environment more than somewhat tech.
Yeah, some of those Final Fantasies, man, I see them and they're like 4 guys driving around in a car, and I'm like, what the fuck? There's cars? You know what I mean? Just like a Toyota, like a high-end. I'm like, I thought there were dragons in the world, and and spirits, and now there's a car that's fucking pump gasoline into this thing, and Scott probably has airbags in it. Right. I'm like, this just takes me out.
Yeah.
Which was that 15?
That's 15.
Yeah, I was
the
like,
road
whoa.
trip. The bro road trip.
Yeah, I was like, whoa. That's just weird for me.
Oh man. Yeah, it's so 9 because it's fully traditional high fantasy, right? It's all medieval and castles and. Well,
9, I believe they try to take the artwork from 1.
Is that
the
what
classic?
It was? Yeah. People were telling me the soundtrack's all kind of variations of the original and whatever. Yeah. It's a big throwback to the original. So I'm thinking maybe I just like that setting more. And also a big thing was 9. The characters are all very specific archetypes. As soon as you get them, you're like, oh, that's my healer,
right?
And that's my mage and whatever. Whereas 7 and 8. You can experiment, or you can have some fun and switch it around and use them for whatever, I guess, type you want. But 9, because the weapons determine your abilities and things like that. I think that's one of those things again where I'm like, oh, I just want to be told what this character is. I don't want to experiment and deal with all that. So
you don't want that ambiguity.
Yeah, but I think I can totally see why 7 is regarded so much, because if I think back to when it was released, I totally get that everyone's mind was blown, both in every aspect, graphics, story.
It was
everything.
3 CDs when it came out.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was just what? And then you're like, oh, well, that's just the first CD. You haven't even gotten to this whole other part in the game in the second CD. One thing I've wondered, and I guess this is always true for different games, different genres, is that they stay popular. And oftentimes they'll fade off. Nobody's making MOBAs right now.
Right.
Now, Japanese RPGs, when I was a kid, were so hot.
Right.
I mean, in America. I mean, it was there was a period where I was just trying to buy any RPG and play through it. And now Japanese RPGs actually don't do well at all. They don't sell. I mean, they still make them, but it's very niche. And
yeah, it's much more of a cult following at this point.
Yeah. It's almost I mean, these are even older games, but I grew up also playing point-and-click adventure games, like King's Quest or Monkey's Island.
Yeah.
And they also still make those games, but it's all indie.
Yeah.
And
everything's indie.
I'll buy them.
Right.
These are the games I actually play before I go to bed. It's it's just kind of lets my brain calm down and I can conk out. But it seems like Japanese RPGs are in the same state. Now, you're going through kind of the history of Final Fantasy.
Right.
Even though you started with 15 and then you kind of gone back. So what is your take on why Japanese RPGs, a lot of people listening to this will not even get what we're talking about when I say true. JRPG.
Yeah, you're right.
What happened, do you think?
It's weird. So obviously, because we've been talking, and I've constantly been saying I want to be told what to do, but at the same time, I don't want my games simple, right?
Right.
There's a reason people who like StarCraft. It's not simple. It's not convoluted, but it's not simple, right? It's a very complex game, and I think just overall, I think even single player games are maybe hit with this idea of. These days, I think people are just more impatient when it comes to gaming, and you just want your adrenaline hits more often. And when it comes to JRPGs, the whole aspect of a JRPG is that there's a big payout, but you have to work for it, right? That's what kind of makes them JRPGs, right? You have to grind and you have to discover these secret side quests and get the ultimate weapons, and that's what makes them cool. And there's a story but the story is also like 100 hours. So if you're not getting a dopamine hit like every hour, you probably get lost. And sometimes, for instance, that's probably why I have trouble with things like Skyrim, right? Because if I'm not progressing the story and I get lost in this open world, after 2 days, I'm like, what am I even doing, right? Like, what's my character? What's the story? Like, I forget, and I just move on. So I think it's just, it's part of it is probably length, right? Just the way like everything's faster these days, right? Not just games, just tech and transportation. Everything just has to be quicker and faster. So part of it's length, but I think it's also just, not to say that like gamers have become lazy per se, but I think just culturally around the world, like people just want the effects more often. Like it almost sounds like we're describing a drug, but like I think that's the same anywhere, right? Whether it's like, say, even food, right? Like people want to try like this whole idea of going to the best like Yelp reviews or whatever more often is now just a thing. Whereas back in the day, like you just went to the same restaurant and you had the same dish like once a week or whatever, and you were fine with it. But these days it's like, oh, I gotta try this like new dish, or new restaurant opened up, I gotta go. And I think that's just become this cultural cycle. So for games where it's like, oh, I have to commit to this for like who knows how many weeks depending on my like regular life schedule, like that's crazy. I mean, for me, like I'm kind of cracking down on each Final Fantasy per week, but that's because I'm like streaming it like 8 hours a day every day. Not everyone can afford to do that, right? So I think that's a big part where people are just like, if I'm spending $60, this technically has more content, but I just want to like get it done. Like I just want to have fun with it as soon as I start it to the end, and then like finished, and then go to the next game.
I also wonder if at that period of time, the way the games are made, a Japanese RPG was the easiest way to also tell a story.
That could be it too.
I mean, it was in that time period. It was mostly, if you look at the way stories were told in games, you didn't have a lot of ways to. I mean, for instance, in this era, this is of the time where there were beat 'em ups, where you have like two or four characters depending on what system you're on, and you're just fighting off all these very beatable minions, and you're walking from left to right. And it's hard to get a story in there. That's true. In an RPG, you can have towns you walk through and talk to people, and that can be separated from the combat in a way. And I wonder if that's part of it too.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the biggest things I realized was I was impressed with how much story like 7, 8, and 9 were able to tell without. I mean, 9 had way more cutscenes, and 8 as well, but without like for instance, they don't have voice acting, right? So when I'm streaming them, like I'm voice acting every character,
right?
But then I had just played Remake, where it's just a movie, and then you like have combat in between. Like there's cutscenes, and even when you're walking around, there's dialogue. And so that's probably a big part of it too. Because, for instance, Remake is not the traditional JRPG, right? It's an action RPG, and so it's a very different formula in how they've. And that's one thing that impressed me. They kind of kept the core, like the materia system and all that of the original, but then the whole combat system seems to work well in the modern age. But I think that's a way that they've revived that genre, is they've adjusted it to now tell stories in a different way, and then also make the combat feel a bit more like part of the story, rather than now like going back to the combat scene and you just grinding levels. Like it's a very different thing.
Do you find you're going back and basically playing these classics, and I think particularly from Final Fantasy 7 through 10 basically was like, for that the Final Fantasy franchise has been around for so long, but that for me at least was kind of the peak. That series of games, there was a certain style to them. Do you find it hard, as someone who obviously plays a lot of modern games, to go back and do that whole turn-based combat system?
No, I've always liked turn-based games, whether they're turn-based RPGs or like strategic RPGs, turn-based strategy, right? I've always liked it. I think there's a good, like, it's just a different layer of, and there's still like, if you have the, especially in Final Fantasy, if you have it so that it's constant action, like real action or real-time action, like there's still a level of like micro that you have to calculate, right, in terms of timing and whatever. But I didn't have trouble adjusting to it. I actually kind of miss it, but I can see why it may not be as appealing these days. Again, it's just, it perhaps doesn't feel as impactful than pressing a button and like actually swinging a sword or like shooting a weapon. So it's definitely now that we've seen what game engines can do and like show us in terms of entertainment, maybe turn-based strategy or like turn-based games are not as impactful.
One thing about the very first Final Fantasy is it's so obviously it's on NES,
right?
And so when I was playing it as a kid, I was filling in all the story gaps.
Right.
I mean, in some level, it's almost like reading a book, right? Yeah. I mean, they tell you what the town is, and you look at a map, and you're kind of imagining almost.
Yeah.
And as each game has come out, because games are getting so crazy now.
Yes.
I mean, you can just make stuff look. Yeah. You no longer have to use your imagination in a sense, which is in some ways really good. But I've found, and you'll even see this through the progression of 7 into 10, and then if you go all the way to 15, is how much more Japanese-y the games begin to become. We're like, if you look at like some of the artwork for Final Fantasy VII, you're like, okay, cool. It kind of looks kind of anime, but like by the time I can't remember, there was one I got, maybe it was Final Fantasy 11 or 12 or 13 or something.
Okay.
Where it was so anime-ish.
I think both 12 and 13 are kind of considered like that. Just for graphics and aesthetics.
Where it almost I guess it wasn't the way I had envisioned.
Sure.
The game, even though I mean, I've been to Japan a couple times, and it's like, okay, yeah, everything is very anime, and it's a certain way. But for me growing up, it wasn't, I guess, the way I kind of sorted it in my head. But I've always wondered with some of the long-form storytelling that these games put out, do you think it's turned some people off to it? Because, some people love anime, other people are not that into it,
I would, it's definitely more polarizing. Yeah. But at the same time, like you said, it's just as tech has evolved, right? It's just become the natural progression that you just go with it. You use the engines as they get better, and then you're able to tell your story. So I think from a like game dev and producer standpoint, obviously now you get to really tell the story as you envisioned it. But at the same time, you're definitely losing out on a bit of the audience because, like for instance, if there's no voice actors, like everyone's going to imagine the voices a little differently, right? Like into the character, and that alone tells a different story.
And you're going to experience this with Titus.
Okay. Is that is this
in
the
Final Fantasy
X?
X?
Is he the one that laughs?
The voice actor that did Titus, I think his name's Quentin Flynn. He's the same voice. Did you play Metal Gear Solid at all?
No.
So Metal Gear Solid 2, you don't play as Snake for most of the game. You play as a character called Raiden.
Oh, okay, yeah.
A lot of people hated Raiden.
Okay.
He's long, blonde-haired, ninja guy. Quentin Flynn, and I think that's his name. Actually, Ryan, can you just double-check this? Thanks, man. Is the same voice actor for Titus.
Oh.
Raiden and Titus, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and so, like, this guy voiced two, I guess, unlikable characters, but, I think there's something to the voice acting with both of those characters where
it just didn't.
He was a little bit too obnoxious at points in time. And
gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm curious to see what you think of that. Now voice acting in games is impeccable.
Yes, yeah, it's come a long way. But even now, like for instance, what was crazy to me was people were complaining about the voice acting in Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Oh, really? I thought it was quite good.
But for me, I thought it was like one of the best voicing acting I've ever seen in a video game.
Yeah.
But a lot of people were saying that that's just not how they envisioned like Aerith or Tifa. Wow. And I was like, are you serious? Like, this is exactly how I see this. But I've never seen them in the original, right? So then going back to original, all I could do was hear the voices in Remake and dub them over. But so I think that's one of those things where I think one of the coolest things about Final Fantasy VII Remake is that it's really shown to light the power that older games had, and maybe some things, like you said, that we've lost along the way just because things evolved that way in terms of tech and just meta in terms of genres and things like that, where like you said, like you don't have to imagine anything anymore. It's just there.
It's just
you
there.
See it, you hear it. Yeah. Sometimes now with VR, right? Like you're there, like you're literally in the world, and you just don't have to imagine it. And sometimes it makes cooler experiences, but other times I don't think it lasts as much, and it doesn't maybe hold as much meaning for different people. Whereas Final Fantasy VII, like obviously everyone who played it at the time, like it held a lot of meaning for you, but maybe in different ways.
So Japanese companies are having huge successes with remakes.
Yes.
Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, Nathanius was always telling me I got to go back and play the Resident Evils. He's a big Resident Evil fan, and I'm like, yeah. I mean, I want to, but I don't have time. The only Resident Evil I ever beat was 7. Was just
okay.
When it came out, I played through that. But Resident Evil 2 came out not long ago. 3 has just come out.
Yeah.
And these remakes are crushing it. And this is where this conversation is going to kind of take a twist here, but for instance, with Blizzard remaking Warcraft 3, and this remaster is a disaster. I'm curious, how is it on one side of the globe, the remastered games are, and granted, these are different games. One's an RTS, and the other one is a kind of survival horror game, but they're having so much success with this, to the point where they're actually just making a better version of the old game.
Right.
I did a whole bunch of research after I beat Resident Evil 2, and I thought, oh my God, this is...
Yes.
I'm so glad that they remade this for me, because I would have just missed it.
Yeah.
What is your take? I guess the first part of the question would be what the Japanese are doing correctly in this process, because there's been several remakes of games that have all seemed to have done very well. People are very happy. And then I guess what's happening with Blizzard. And I don't know if there are other remakes that have come out recently for Western games, but Blizzard's been going back and redoing.
Call of Duty's had remasters or HD versions.
I guess Skyrim, they're just releasing it on everything that's ever
fair.
Yeah, that runs it. But
Call of Duty's probably the only other blockbuster name I could think of that's done it more than once. To varying degrees of success. But yeah, I think in terms of the Japanese ones, like you said, obviously, assuming they're different genres, right, and there's different factors, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said they're just making it better, right, and not just in terms of just UI or just graphics, but it's very clear to the player, whether you're new to it or not, that they've said, okay, we can make the graphics obviously better and some of the UI and experience, but then how does that affect the storytelling, right? How does that affect the voice acting and the cutscenes? Maybe we need to add more cutscenes. Maybe we need to change some of them. And I think now it's made it where it's even if it's a remaster per se, all of the successful ones almost seem like reimaginings in the current engine, basically. Where it's doing justice for people who had nostalgia, but like you said, for people who maybe missed out on it, you're able to enjoy it without having to always keep in mind, it's an old game, just let it pass.
Without the distraction of this was 1996.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and that's what a computer could run.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to think about that. They've just made it where it's entirely new. When it comes to some of these other games, whether it's Warcraft or even Call of Duty, I would say Call of Duty had the remastered for Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, where they had both, I think, the campaign and multiplayer, or was it maybe even just multiplayer? But that did well, but that was partly because that year the Call of Duty that released wasn't doing well.
Right.
So people wanted that nostalgia trip more than the current game. They just didn't like the current game. Now Modern Warfare 2 just released as a remaster. And they made this weird decision. I get it, but they made this decision to only release the campaign and not the multiplayer aspect. And I played through it because I really liked the original, so I streamed it. But I think it's $30, and I was like, this is not worth $30. The campaign's not long. Call of Duty campaigns aren't long. It looks great. It plays great, but it's also not it just looks better, right? And none of the cutscenes have drastically changed. It's just the same experience as I imagined. It just looks better. So it almost just simply justifies me spending the time to play it again without going through the worst graphics. That's the only thing it changed for me. It didn't change the experience or make me really realize how impactful it was at the time. I think I almost would have gotten that feeling better if I went back and played the original instead of playing a remaster. And I think there's this expectation of, especially for games that have multiplayer aspects, right, like Warcraft, I think the expectation is, well, you could have just literally just upgraded say the graphics, right? And people are still playing the original, and it's a multiplayer experience, and it's a very user created experience. So if you're gonna sell a new version, you need something new. it can't just be when it comes to like a multiplayer game. I think it's hard for gamers to accept that. Or even,
but when they released it, it wasn't even finished.
Well,
they didn't even have a ladder.
To be fair, that's like a whole. That's just a problem, right?
Yeah. But like, what is happening with Blizzard in like a game like this? Like Warcraft 3, I think it's about 17 years old.
Right. Very old.
And people are still playing it.
Yeah.
And some people that might watch this and think nobody plays it. Actually, it's very popular and it's quite big in China.
Yeah.
Blizzard releases.
Yeah.
This is the worst thing, by the way, that Blizzard's ever done. This is awkward because I cast their games, but this is like, the Hong Kong thing was scary, but it's also like, okay, this is an interesting conversation. What is, China's role in the world, and should they have access to the games and the politics and money? Very complicated situation, right? Diablo Immortal, maybe that game's going to be good.
Right.
I'm open-minded. I didn't think I would like Hearthstone. I loved it when it came out. There is a stigma with cell phone games. Probably not a good idea to announce it.
Right, that was the mistake. But it's not the
keynotes.
Game's fault.
Yeah, it's not the game's fault. And I don't know. Maybe that's the game I play when I'm on the train going to GSL. I don't know. I'm trying to be open-minded here. But the Warcraft remastered thing, this is proving that Blizzard can't make games. They can't even make games that they've already made. That's fucking crazy. And also they release something that's not finished. It's a 17-year-old game. You don't have to rush it.
Yeah, I do wonder do you think it has anything to do with the whole cycle of early access games these days, right?
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah.
Is that I think companies have gotten so comfortable just releasing basically hunks of garbage, and then we'll fix it in 6 months or we'll fix it in a year.
Yeah.
And it's, and the expectation that the players are supposed to sit around. Now, here's what's unfortunate if you're a Warcraft 3 guy. You don't have any other game.
Right.
There's nothing else that you can... You don't go, fuck this, I'm going to go to the other Warcraft 3 game.
Yeah.
No, there's nothing. There's nothing else. It's literally the most unique, even out of RTS.
Right.
People oscillate between StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2. There's nowhere to go, so they have to wait around. But it just seems like such an odd, self-inflicted wound. Mm-hmm. And I think you're right. The standard is early access is okay.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of sit around and keep tuning it, But I think Blizzard has basically, I think the shareholders probably put a lot of pressure on them.
True.
And I think shareholders are partially responsible for screwing up games in general.
Yeah.
Because they want to make money more quickly instead of just, I think in the long term, if they put out a really good product and people trust them, you probably make more money guaranteed in the long run that way. But also, there was probably so much money that Blizzard could have made in Warcraft 3 in China in esports.
Yeah, I was shocked when I saw what was happening, what state it was in.
Yeah.
When it got released, because everyone was very excited, right? Yeah. Everyone was like, Blizzard's going to bring it back, right? They're going to turn things around. It's going to be a Blizzard we've always known and loved. They've made some mistakes, it's okay. And then it was like, let us one-up ourselves and make the greatest mistake we could.
Well, think about this. There's all this money going into Overwatch League. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's going great. Right? Yeah. It's not meeting their expectations. Now, coronavirus is also screwing up all of esports.
True.
But that aside, I've worked in and out of China a lot. Uh-huh. And I've worked there when there's a Warcraft 3 game going on. They are nuts for Warcraft 3.
Yeah.
Those are the most crazy fans ever. That country loves that game. That's the biggest country in the world, just from a pure business standpoint. Even.
Right.
It seems like they've screwed up the Warcraft 3 opportunity in China.
Yeah.
In Europe, where Warcraft 3 is also quite popular. I'm just blown away that Blizzard's able to get themselves into a position like this.
I think talking about the whole culture of early access and different standards, it's funny to me. I don't think a lot of people even now realize that let's say that this whole early access thing, it's just the way we have to accept it now, but right. that is pretty limited actually to the West, and if anything maybe more so the US, right? Because for instance, if you look at Korea, even people are playing Sudden Attack. Sudden Attack killed Sudden Attack 2. right? Like
Right.
Sun and 2
Yeah.
wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
People were like, oh, we're going back to the way older game that's like 6-7 years old because we know that's finished.
For people listening that probably, a lot of people probably don't know what sudden
Not at
attack
all.
is, this is a Counter-Strike carbon copy.
Yes.
There's a lot of these that are going around and are played in countries where Counter-Strike's not big.
Right.
And that's sudden attack in Korea.
Yeah, but so the quick history is Sudden Attack, the original is very, very old, over 10 years old, I think. And then Sudden Attack 2 was released in the middle. It went through a bunch of like other business and political turmoil, but the bottom line was because of that, gamers were like, we'd rather play the game we know and love and is finished and we just know what to expect from one, even if the graphics engine is like worse and the game, you know, just plays maybe worse because of how old it is. And so Sudden Attack 1 to this day is still like one of the most played FPS games online in
the
Korea.
world. Yeah.
And so then like Valorant comes out, right? And I see all this talk in Korea where they're like, do people not realize like people went back to Sudden Attack 1 after Sudden Attack 2? Like they're not the Sudden Attack community is not suddenly going to be like, oh, Valorant just looks better, we're going to switch. Like that's not what makes people switch.
This is the same thing that happened with Korea and StarCraft too.
Yeah.
Is that people are so into what was StarCraft 1. It's
Right.
hard. I think Blizzard was pretty shocked.
Yes, I would say
You know,
so.
and StarCraft obviously it still does fine out here as a game, but like StarCraft 1 is much, much bigger.
Yeah, so there's just these, I think, different standards from the different cultures where your expectations, your priorities are different, right? Depending on the region. Some regions or even some people, right, just care more about graphics versus gameplay versus just not having bugs. But this notion of early access, whether it's devs doing it themselves or on Steam, has become so widespread in the West where I think it's easy for a dev or a dev company and publishing company to be like, that's okay, especially now because we can patch it. But if you think about it, Japanese companies don't patch their games that often, even to this day.
They are still releasing games. Like, I know this, I sound old saying this, but when I was young, you bought a game and it was finished,
Right, you had the pressure that if it sucked, like you couldn't fix it. Like
no, you were
had to
fucked.
be good.
If the game sucked, you were fucked. They had to do so much beta testing. It's crazy now. Like, it's like they could just release the fuck. I don't know. Like the whole thing doesn't work, but like, well, hold on, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's great that we can patch stuff now. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And that especially for like new games that come out. Oh, there's some exploit.
Right.
Let's patch it. Let's
Yes.
fix it. But yeah, people are releasing not finished stuff, and I mean, look, I feel bad if you're a Warcraft 3 guy. I really
100%.
feel bad because
100%.
it's like, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
And I don't know. Do you think that because I believe this is probably a shareholder thing where it's like we have to release the game now.
Sure.
We have to turn a profit by quarter 3.
Right.
Let's just release it, have everybody buy it. We'll be in the green or in the black or whatever you want to call it, and then we'll fix it later. Do you think that's part of the issue here, or
I mean, surely it has an effect, right?
Yeah.
So to speak from my experience, like when I was at ESL and I started, being more involved in the business side of things, like there were events that ESL would do, and these are the events that exactly the esports community is like, wait, ESL is running like that tournament or that game? Like these are the events where it was like, well, we need to hit like a profit, or a margin, and this is going to get us there. So let's do it. And I from a producer standpoint, I'm sitting there like, yeah, but like we can't produce this that well with the money, like with the profit we need to make in this short time. And they're like, oh, that's not the important thing here, because like our brand will live with like the bigger tournaments and the events, and we need to get this done.
They'll take a loss here. They'll take an L.
Right. And so, granted, it sounds really bad when you put it that way, but at the same time, the more I experience it, like I get it, right? Certain times you have to pick your battles, right? And as a company, you do need to make money, and as you get bigger and bigger, there's shareholders. It just gets more complicated, and so you need to hit certain financial standards, which is absolutely understandable. But so now you just need to make sure you have a healthy balance and battle, like internal struggle almost, between the people who want to uphold like standards and vision versus the people who want to just uphold like this financial standard, because you do need both if you want to continue growing. And so I think you can't I don't think anyone could go out there and say like, oh, there's no way that they weren't, like Blizzard wasn't affected by shareholders. Surely, like it has to be a thing.
Yeah.
Because with the size of Activision Blizzard, you have to be responsible to some extent to shareholders.
But what's strange about it is that historically, and I think Blizzard's in a really interesting position. I mean, a very difficult one, but it's one that I think actually should probably be studied. Like seriously, in business school and everything else. Because you have a company that started out and they were killing it.
Yes.
So hard. I mean, like Warcraft 2 was just earth-shatteringly successful. I mean, and this is one of the reasons why everything at that time was an RTS.
Yeah.
Diablo, the fact that the dungeon would randomize, I guess is the right word.
Itself,
self-generate. Was crazy, and they were so good that they would. I mean, BlizzCon is them with each of their developers giving speeches. Here's what we're doing next. Like they were such innovators. They had their own con. They don't need to go to E3 or anything else. Excuse me. And now, they appear to be morphing into something more Activision-esque in that they are like releasing. And Activision also has a very successful business model. I know people want to knock on them.
Yes.
They'll just. I mean, it's kind of sad how much they re-released Guitar Hero until it was just exhausting. But they know they can just release like a Call of Duty every year, and every
it sells.
Every bro will buy it and play it, and they'll buy the next one. And I understand that, but when they merge together, there seems to be too much pressure on Blizzard to release games regularly. When before they would always say we're only going to release the game when it's done.
Yeah.
And they also always have games in incubation we don't know about that they just kill.
Right.
Because it's not. They don't like where it's gone and they don't want it there. And now they're just. It seems like they're being forced to continue to push out what could potentially be games while still giving speeches, for instance, talking about like how they're innovating and oh my God, you're not going to believe it, and then the curtain drops and it's like a Diablo cell phone game and people are going, what? And I don't know how they even fix this for themselves. You know what I'm saying? Because they built this image of perfection and that they're brilliant and come sit in an audience and we'll tell you what we're going to do to innovate, and now they're releasing Warcraft is not even finished. It doesn't have a ladder still.
Right. I think you're right in that there seems to have been a struggle in wanting Blizzard to shift into that other model where it's more about cranking out games and making money. And again, like you said, you can't say there's anything inherently wrong with that. It works. No. And also, like I grew up on Call of Duty, so I enjoyed most Call of Duty. Some of them were bad, but most of them. But like you said, it's this. Like Blizzard wasn't built for that, and they hadn't ever done that. So I think if you wanted to transition that way, if you wanted to make that drastic switch, you actually just needed to do like a shock and awe, right? Like you go silent for like 2 years, not releasing any games, and then suddenly it's like, hey, it's like we got Diablo like 3 expansion, and then 4, and then 4 expansion, like just nonstop. Like if you did that, I think people would be shocked, but you like don't have time to think about if it's good or bad because you love it, right? And then you just kind of get sucked back into the world, and maybe you just keep playing the games, and hopefully they're also somewhat finished. So that's a big part. But I think it was this like weird, like we're gonna try doing these things where we're releasing games in different platforms, and Overwatch 2 got announced and things like that.
Which also isn't even Overwatch 2.
Right.
It's like DLC, which is also very weird.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it almost feels like they're just kind of half-assing it, and now that makes it a bad model where you're not all in on grinding out production, and you're not all in on like creative perfection. So now you're just stuck in the middle where you're releasing imperfect games, and that's the only thing people are going to remember. And I don't know, I think the damage is done, and not that you can't recover from it, but it's done where it's going to take a while for people to understand, or like for Blizzard to regain that trust in either direction. Do
you think that Blizzard can recover from this, or are we just going to be dealing with a different, a different company entirely? Is it going to just kind of mutate into something else?
Whether it mutates, I do think that's debatable. I think that there is a possibility where like the Blizzard of old doesn't come back, at least not as Blizzard, right? Maybe people leave, or just another company sprouts that kind of takes that throne and that role for gamers. But but is it can they recover? Yes. Would it take a lot of time? I think so. Also, just because there's just more competition these days, right? There's just way more to break through, and with everyone, and I think we're noticing this now with COVID canceling all these other conventions. Like all game companies are doing their own like online marketing and presentations, and everyone is touting that they're doing the next big thing, right? And that's just marketing, right? But with the number of game companies we have saying that now, Blizzard just saying that again, and even if they do it right, like saying it once isn't going to be enough to like get people's attention again, right? Because people have lost that trust. And it takes a while to build back up. Like I would say, for instance, Ubisoft obviously lost a lot of faith for a while because they started just cranking out games nonstop. Right. And then they got back a lot of faith with games like Siege. But even then, it's still a very niche community that's like, hey, have you heard? Like Ubisoft's actually like doing things the way we appreciated it and we wanted it. And people are like, wait, really? Like a lot of people still don't understand like why Siege is doing well. And the story that Siege wasn't even meant to be this like long-term game. It was all supposed to be one of those games that just like released and then done. Yeah. But because of the community and what they saw was available, they've started really building upon it. But it takes time, and I think it's hard for Blizzard to regain that. Also, because they've spread themselves so thin, right? They have all these different esports things to care about, right? Even after the number of things they've cut within esports, like Overwatch League alone is just so much attention.
It almost seems like they, like, I guess overextended with their esports.
Yeah.
Suddenly everything had to be an esport, and this is how you get Overwatch, where it's like Overwatch, that Titan was supposed to be an MMO.
Yes.
Shooting game.
Yes.
And then they're like, well, I understand. It's like they have this thing. Mm-hmm. Let's make it an esport. And in my experience with Blizzard is I've just seen them move people from esport to esport to esport,
yes,
where it's like you should have the same people on the same esport until they know it perfectly, and then you're supposed to keep that alive. The whole esports thing is supposed to be, in my opinion, a long-term plan. Mm-hmm. It's not supposed to be spinning a quick buck.
Yeah.
Making money easily. And yeah, it just seems like they were so esports, everything esport, and then they're like, well, we'll just focus on our newest esport. And then they shot Heroes of the Storm in the head.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't know, the whole thing's very, very strange to kind of watch.
Yeah, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I can't shake off the feeling that it was very primarily a knee-jerk reaction to Riot and them taking everything in-house, right? Because it was right around the time when Riot fully took in everything in-house, like globally. Like they took LCS and then LCS EU in-house, and then LCK, they
even
took
in
it
Korea,
all they
LCK.
took it all internally around 2015, 2016, and that's when Overwatch was like, we're releasing Overwatch and Overwatch League like at the same time.
Yeah.
But I say it these days too with all these new games. I always tell people like, if your announcement with your game is that you're gonna have an esports league, like I will bet money that you're not gonna succeed because it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's like some XFL stuff or something, where it's like, here we are,
right?
StarCraft is a great example of this, but League as well is that these were just games that people kept playing, and then there were people playing so much there was demand for tournaments, and I think that, for instance, with Valorant, I think they probably will have some success with it, but it's because it's in some sense a carbon copy of Counter-Strike, and there's some spells. It's similar
I would also
enough,
say Valorant, so I think if you're going to announce a game and you're going to say this is a esports game, the way to do it would be like Valorant did, where they're like, all of their marketing is purely, hey, we care about competitive integrity, right? Like the thing that people get hyped about Valorant, or in the beginning, now there's obviously some drama around it, was like anti-cheat and their network and their ping and all of that, like their servers and 128 tick. Like their marketing was not about, look at how cool this agent is. Like, that was not, like they had videos, but it wasn't the headline. And so if you do that, that's fine, because I think the expectation you set both for yourself and the players and the community is that, like, this is all we're going to care about. It's about competition, and we want to make it fair. And even then, they've already announced that they want to do a little bit more like grassrootsy, overseeing, community tournaments because of their experience with League of Legends. But that's one thing. Whereas, like, if you're trying to release a blockbuster game like Overwatch or whatever other games that are coming out these days, and then you're like, also like $1 million prize pool, it's like, do we even know if your game is gonna like work? Like, how would you have possibly tested a full esports league environment in beta internally, right? Like,
I mean, it seems like the only thing that's definitely safe if you're going to make an esport is to try to emulate something that's already working. You know, I mean, like fighting games, I think it's pretty safe that fighting games have been figured out. Like we know how to make fighting games. You can make a really good one and put it out there. But for some stuff, I mean, for instance, with Overwatch, there aren't other esports that are even close to being like that. It's sort of like a 3D MOBA.
Yeah, it was a whole new genre.
And then just like this is now super competitive, you know. And I mean, and Overwatch is competitive. I'm not totally trashing on it, but yeah, it seems so forced.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the unfortunate thing is that there's obviously clearly a big like skill difference between good people and great people and not so good people in Overwatch, and there's strategy involved. I get that. There's a lot of skill involved in that game, 100%. And so I actually think it could have grown bigger if it wasn't like served on a platter that Blizzard decided this was how this esports is going to work. Yeah. Right. And the worst part is like maybe this model would have been fine, but like we just don't know because we never got to experiment. Right. We just have no idea. And then because they had invested so much, they had to switch like how they were doing things with the whole like bans, the hero bans and rotation. Like I'll be honest, I was like following the headlines and it took me like week 4 to realize what was actually happening and that these were actually just like random bans in the game. Like you just couldn't play that character. And I was like, what? But like they had to take these drastic measures because they invested in it and they were like, well, we have to do something. So yeah, it's
when do you think the coronavirus is gonna finally die down?
Oh,
how long are we in this for? You think?
I mean, like I think fully died out. I would say probably
like things are back to normal. Like you and me can actually go to events again and work.
Okay, like with crowd and everything, like in a stadium.
Yeah,
I would probably say 2021. Really,
I think 2021.
I think so. I think now more than anything, I think certain like local levels of everyday life can, depending on the region, start returning, like later half of the year. But like now that events have already been canceled, like it'd be very bold of someone to announce a stadium event without a vaccine in place, like in the world. Right. You know what I mean? Like for them to be like, oh, we think there's been enough time to pack 5,000 people in a stadium. Like that'd be a very bold move.
Yeah, I think it might even be like 2 years or something.
Maybe, yeah. Because
this is the thing. People are saying like 18 months for a vaccine, but that's like the best.
Right, that's the best case scenario.
Best case scenario.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you miss traveling or going overseas, or have you embraced this pretty well?
I do miss getting to go overseas for whatever reasons, whether it's events or visiting, but not too much. I'm not gonna lie, I've actually kind of been able to appreciate the just there being less noise in esports. Like there was a lot of things going on in esports. Let's be honest.
Lots of drama. Twitter is unbearable.
Yeah. I mean, even now there's like, I was thinking that today. This morning I looked at Twitter. I was like, I'm not looking at this anymore today. There's
too much.
So much. But there's always drama, and with like the number of games I had ever even set foot in. Just because I had been involved at one point, I feel almost responsible to follow them closely, and then you take like StarCraft, Counter-Strike, DotA, League of Legends, various fighting games, Call of Duty, and I'm like, man, with all these events, it was a slog to try to catch up, and I'm in a unique position. I get that, right? I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I do think. And I don't want people to take this the wrong way that like we need like not that there should be a culling of events, but I think this is putting into perspective like what value certain events have or had, right? And which ones should be like prioritized, both in terms of a TO and developer, but also like a viewer, right? Of, like this is what was more important to me. And then like these other games or other tournaments I can appreciate in a different way, or I don't have to sit and watch all 6 hours of them. I can watch highlights, and I think it'll bring about some different ideas about how to, I guess, like monetize around these events in the future.
Are you going to stick to full-time streaming? Are you enjoying it, or do you want to go back? Or
it's I've been saying even until like last week, just even to myself that no, like I don't have any plans to like try to commit into full-time streaming. But coming into this week, I'm starting to kind of toy with the idea. Not because I think it's easy, but I'm actually thinking maybe it does more of the things I want to do in like my career within the gaming space. And this is nothing against like esports, but even within esports, right? People who have talked with me multiple times know that like the reason I was okay moving away from a full-time hosting and like casting role was because I wanted to make impacts in other areas, right? For different reasons. Like there's already a lot of good, talent out there, on-screen talent. And also like you got to spread that talent around so that you can impact things on a full scale rather than just while you're on screen or, just in one game. And so that's always kind of been my mission. So now getting to experience, like we talked about in the beginning of the podcast, the positives around streaming, I'm wondering if that's something maybe I should consider at the very least. Because until now I was like, I'm just doing this because it's like the best thing I can do right now.
Right.
But now it's slowly starting to change to, I should at least give it my all at least once and see. And if it doesn't work out long term, at least I'll have learned other things I can get from it to go back into like full-time esports like tournament realm. But I'll be honest, do I miss esports tournaments? Sure, absolutely. Like there's nothing like the energy of being in a stadium.
Yeah,
Right,
I hate this. I miss doing I miss audiences. I miss meeting people.
Yeah. And it was such a core part of our lives, right?
Yeah.
You just knew minimum like X number of times a year I could go and just feed off of this energy and then meet my, friends from around the world that are casting, that care about this game. And then we can talk about other stuff. And now it's gone.
Yeah.
It's just not there. So it's a very weird feeling. But so while I miss it, I think also because my mindset's always been like, I can move away from it if I know that there's a different goal for me in whatever aspect of that industry. I think I'm in a bit of a different boat than most others who have stuck with it like full time all throughout. Again, because I've hopped around in so many different roles within esports.
How is this podcast, by the way?
Fun.
Good. Thank
Awesome.
you so much for doing this, man.
No, I love it.
Can you tell people who are watching or listening where they can find you on Twitch?
So you can find me on Twitch and Twitter. I have an Instagram, but I barely use it. On Will Chobra, so it's WILLCHOBRA. It's all the same across Twitch and Twitter. I also have like a small Discord server that's starting to grow where you can just talk about various things, especially if you want to talk about like Korean stuff, whether it's culture, language, whatever. We got a little space set up there too. So that's where you can find me.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
That does it for this episode, guys. Thanks again to Chobra. I really appreciate it. I know you just moved back to Korea. You were super busy, so I'm grateful you took the time to sit down and talk to me. Again, guys, if you like this, the subs on Twitch are appreciated, but if you want to support this podcast directly, the people who help make the podcast and the equipment we're acquiring to record and film it, you can go to patreon.com/Tasteless Podcast. And that's it. We should have another podcast airing in 2 weeks, guys. I'll see you then. Thanks so much for listening. I love you. Bye-bye. This podcast was produced by Estate. Artwork by Alaris. Music by Mark Lentz. Intro by Sky Lee. Take care, guys. We love you. Bye-bye. Stay safe. Wash your hands.